This episode is brought to you by Forney Industries, official sponsor of Faction 46 and Nice Motorsports Truck Series teams. Forney offers versatile welding and plasma cutting machines, along with a full line of metalworking accessories for beginners, do-it-yourselfers, and professionals. Forney has everything you need for your next metalworking project. Shop for these top-of-the-line products at forneyInd.com. That's FORNEYIND.com, or at an authorized Forney dealer near you.
Hey there, NASCAR fans. Have you got your copy of the latest edition of NASCAR Pole Position Print Magazine? If not, there's no better time than now to subscribe at polepositionmag.com. NASCAR Pole Position is the only print magazine covering NASCAR. Officially licensed by NASCAR, NASCAR Pole Position Magazine is published throughout the NASCAR season, and each edition is an instant collector's item, packed with great feature stories and photography. The magazine is even mailed to you in a poly bag for those who love to collect NASCAR memorabilia. At polepositionmag.com, you can even find past issues available to purchase. Get your subscription to NASCAR Pole Position and get great NASCAR content delivered straight to your mailbox throughout the season. Learn more at polepositionmag.com. That's polepositionmag.com.
Hey y'all, Rick Houston here, and I want to tell you about my new show, the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast. I've partnered up with the state of North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to help uncover the history behind moonshining mountain boys, professional wheelmen, and the backwoods and city lights of the Tar Heel State. In the first episode, I sat down with Winston Kelly at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for a little behind-the-scenes gossip about Junior Johnson's engineering skills.
He's got two things in his hand, pipe wrench and channel lock pliers. And they weren't new. They had been around the block a time or two.
Wasn't the first steel they built, I bet.
No. I think the pliers had been red before, but paint had worn off.
And in the second episode, I talked to a professional hillbilly, a.k.a. Dr. Daniel Pierce of UNC Asheville, to find out the real history of moonshiners and their battles with the revenuers.
He wrote about one of his experience of trying to chase down this bootlegger in this souped-up car, and he complained that the government gave him these piece of crap, cheapo cars, and that were really no match, but he thought he was doing pretty good, and then the guy just hits it and just takes off and practically disappeared. But then the guy makes a bootleg turn and comes back towards him. And as he said, it was a game of chicken, and I was a chicken. And so he ran off the road. And actually, he was the guy who caught Junior Johnson at his daddy's steal when Junior got tangled up in a barbed wire fence.
So check out the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast, available on YouTube, dailydownforce.com, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out my regular show on NASCAR history, the Scene Vault Podcast.
Welcome to the Pickup Throwdown Truck Series podcast, the only NASCAR podcast that's always down to truck. And now, your host, Dale Tanhardt.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest edition of the Pickup Throwdown podcast, covering the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, aka hashtag Truck Night in America. Probably my favorite hashtag. Got to use it this past Friday night as the NASCAR circuit arrived at Texas Motor Speedway, and the weekend was kicked off by the Craftsman Truck Series at Texas. One of the longer races of the season. And I think, me and Josh were just talking, Joshua Lipowski, follow him on Twitter at jlipowski18. We were just talking pre-recording here about how much we enjoyed this race, how there was not a negative storyline surrounding the Truck Series, especially when you compare it to Cup. Xfinity, Xfinity's always got the good storylines with how the racing is, but we're pretty proud. As Truck Night in America stands, we're pretty proud about how this race went, and as I said, joined by Joshua Lipowski, I'm Dale Tanhardt. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, all social media platforms, at Dale Tanhardt, at Daily Downforce, and subscribe to this podcast on any and all of your favorite platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and bookmark dailydownforce.com and check us out there every single day. You can check out a lot of the good work from the man, Jay Lipowski, 18. Josh, tell me, what do you think about this race?
You know, I think especially with how last year went, because last year's race obviously had kind of a wild ending that I think left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. This race, yes, there were some cautions, there were some wrecks near the end. There was that, but at the end of the day, it was a really good race, I felt. It was the top drivers were battling for the win throughout the night. I mean, it was Kyle Busch, Corey Heim, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes. Those were kind of the four. Like, those were like the top four, like, throughout the night. They didn't start 1, 2, 3, 4, but they were the class of the field all night. Corey Heim came from 14th, starting in 14th, and then finishing second, which was really entertaining, which was a lot of fun. Kyle Busch led 112 laps, and that was one of those races where, like, and I've seen these before. I've been to these races. I've watched these races before where it's like a guy dominates, but you don't really notice it because, like, the racing throughout the field is entertaining enough to where you kind of are able to be entertained by that. That's kind of how I felt this weekend, and I was really happy to see the fact that throughout the truck race, I felt that Xfinity probably did it a little bit better, but, like, definitely the Truck Series got the higher lane going a lot better than Cup did, which was really good to see because that's when Texas, Texas is a broken track. Let's just be honest. I mean, it's very treacherous. There's a reason why there were so many accidents over the weekend. It's because that track is treacherous, it's slippery, and it's really, really hard to pass, so it ramps up the regression level. And so as a result, you see a lot of incidents from guys just trying to push really hard. Didn't have to do that as much in the Truck Series this weekend, so you were able to see some interesting racing. You saw enough strung out green flag runs to where you could see the guys kind of, stretch their legs a little bit. But I was really impressed. I thought it was a very good race. I think, Kyle Busch absolutely deserved it. But Corey Heim going from 14th to second, I think you have to give him a lot of credit for that. Also, we got some other people to shout out because there's one guy in the top 10 here that I really want to shout out here at some point pretty soon. But still, I thought it was a good race. Not quite as good as Xfinity. Xfinity was really hard to beat. Although, let's be honest, the Xfinity race, the final 20 laps were the good part. Let's just be honest. The first 180 were not as good. They weren't bad, but the last 20 were unbelievable. But
yes,
yeah, it felt like definitely the middle race of the weekend, which isn't a bad thing at worst.
Yeah, like you said, we had talked about last week when we recorded our concern about no passing, because when you went back and watched the Texas race from 2023, it was just a train. Also, one thing we didn't talk about, and maybe you had mentioned it very briefly, last year's race, we did talk about how it was a standalone race, which made a difference. They had controlled pit stops last year because of that, and I'm so glad that's right. Over with in 2024. Jamie Little had mentioned that on the broadcast, and I was like, oh, damn, like, this race is automatically going to be 1,000 times better because the concept of controlled pit stops is, to me, a dooming concept to stock car race, to any type of racing. And literally, because it's in the name, non-competitive pit stops. Non-competition is not good for a competition. So this year we got to get rid of that with all three NASCAR National Series being present at Texas Motor Speedway. And when we were concerned about the passing, I was very pleasantly surprised, like you just mentioned, that trucks were able to make the top lane work. And that kind of makes Texas somewhat fun because you're on the edge, right? Like, I feel like when we went to the repave, or when the repave happened, several years went by, and it's constantly either you apply PJ1, make the racetrack worse in the long run, or everybody just ropes the bottom because you can't even take a chance of going up there. I think the Cup Series still is Exhibit A on that concept of guys, when they went up, try to run the second lane, they're out of control. The trucks were not. Like, you did have guys slip up, you did have some accidents, but that second lane proved to be a very formidable line and a formidable way to make up time and make passes, which to me, based on what we saw in 2023, was very, very refreshing.
Yeah, it was. And I feel like I still am of the belief that I think Texas needs to have some changes made. I don't know if that means a whole reconfiguration. I don't know if that means just smoothing out the surface in some areas. I don't know what that means. But I think that this weekend was about as good of a race as Texas Motor Speedway could put on.
As you could ask for.
Across all 3 series.
Totally.
Yeah. It was as good as you could ask for. If you would have told me heading into the weekend that was the product I was going to get this weekend, I would have been happy with that. Now granted, the I guess you could say the standard for Texas is much lower. I think if you had this kind of a race at maybe Kansas or Las Vegas, I don't know exactly how those races would have been received, but I still think it was about as good as you could have gotten from Texas, and I'm pretty much in the, I understand that it was a decent weekend, but Dale, I got to be honest, I'm still not convinced that Texas doesn't need to be reconfigured, to be honest. I'm still on the train. I think it's got to be changed in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me?
I think it does need to be reconfigured. Like you said earlier, it's a broken racetrack. I think it's completely, it's been mismanaged. Like, the repave was bad. I can't imagine what they were thinking. Look, I'm not an expert on repaves or track configuration in general, but turns 1 and 2 are a nightmare for the top national series, and somewhat of a nightmare for anything that hits the racetrack there. They lost IndyCar, which is a bummer to traditionalists when it comes to open wheel racing. And them putting down the PJ1 over these past few years has made the surface even worse and more like ice. So I think it's been mismanaged top to bottom for the past 6 years, 6-7 years. My only concern is I'd rather them keep it the way it is now than to go to another super speedway. That concept scares me when we start. We added Atlanta, hated that, but I can live with Atlanta because you've got 6 super speedways now, races when it comes to the Cup Series. When it's trucks, now we have 3. I think that's as many as we can go when it comes to the chaos and the tumultuous style of racing that is super speedway racing, and it's not something that needs to be oversaturated in NASCAR. So Kyle Busch said in a presser actually that he's scared, or he thinks they'll go to a super speedway concept, which I think is dangerous for NASCAR.
Yeah, I hope that they don't. And my reasoning, I agree with you on the point that I think too many super speedways is a problem. I think 6 right now is honestly pushing it. I know they're not going to do this. I wouldn't hate it if they took a race away from Atlanta to make it 5 a year. I know they're never going to do that. I personally wouldn't hate it because I think 6 is probably about as much as I would go with that. But I think another reason why is because I think the reason why I can stomach Atlanta is Atlanta's kind of its own entity because it's this 1.5 mile racetrack, and because of its character and the way it's laid out, handling matters a lot more there than it does at Daytona and Talladega. So the racing you get at Atlanta is a little bit different than the type of racing you get at Daytona and Talladega. You don't get the big sprawling 3 wide packs. Particularly in Xfinity, you see this. You see how handling matters, and I actually like that. But I think if you did this to Texas, at that point, Atlanta's not special anymore. It's not unique. It's not its own beast, and it just becomes that way. And then we fall into the trap of, remember we were complaining back in, what was it, the 2010s, all throughout the 2010s about how all the 1.5 miles were the same. Charlotte, Texas, Atlanta, all were yes, they had their own unique differences, but they produced virtually the same product. Las Vegas, Kansas, Kentucky, Chicagoland, go throughout the list. RAP Chicagoland, by the way, that was my home track growing up. But, I feel like if you turn, I hope it comes back. I really hope that it does. But, regardless, I think that Atlanta's good because it's unique. Make Texas that way. Atlanta's no longer unique, and it's going to get really old. I think seeing so many super speedways on the calendar, I think it's going to get old really fast. I think it would. And it seems that SMI is not keen on doing that for now. Now, maybe Texas ages a little bit, and maybe it gets a little bit better. That's, I guess, the hope. That's, I guess, what they're hoping. But I'm a believer in, try to do it. My personal opinion, if I were to reconfigure Texas, if I had an unlimited budget, I would reconfigure it. No,
that's what I would go with.
not with the pack, not with the cup package the way it is. No, I'm not doing that right now. What I would do personally with the current package the way that it is, I would reconfigure it to be similar to a track like Kansas or Homestead with variable banking. Because if you have variable banking in there, that gives you multiple grooves from day one. So that's kind of what I would do. You don't have to do the exact same banking angles. You can change it a little bit. You can maybe do like, 16 to 18 instead of 18 to 20, or maybe do like 20 to 24 or something like that to make it a little bit unique. But I'm just not I'm with the Cup Series short track package the way it is. I'm hesitant to make it a short track yet for right now. But if I had unlimited money, that's what I'd do.
That's a fair point about the package making a difference, and I just feel like we've got our good 1.5 miles. We've got our Vegas and our Kansas, Charlotte. I think Chicago will be back on the schedule eventually. Homestead. We've got our intermediates are good. I think we need more tracks that are unique short tracks like a Rockingham. Imagine if, now obviously I want Rockingham back on the schedule, but imagine if we turn Texas where they could sell some land, make some money, basically do what Fontana lied about doing. Well, I don't think that short track will ever exist at Auto Club. That is gone forever, in my opinion. But imagine if Texas created a short track that's like a Rockingham Bristol hybrid. You cut out a lot of seats. That way, it's when you have races, that place will be filled up with 40,000, 50,000 seats. It's going to look good on TV. It's going to be packed at the stadium or packed at the racetrack. And you shape a racetrack, a short track that's got multiple ways to pass. You can't turn it into a short track that resembles a Richmond or a Martinsville with basically one lane. Low speed, one lane is not going to be good with this as the Cup package is. But for all 3 NASCAR National Series, I think if you give us a short track that has some sort of resemblance to a Rockingham, that'd be awesome. And I don't think anybody would be upset about that. And I think all the points are the track organizations make money from selling off a lot of their land. You cut seats, place will be full, and then you have a short track race that's a new, unique type of short track and gives us good racing too. Now, this is all unbelievably hypothetical, right?
It is.
For now, let's just be happy that we had a good race at the current configuration.
I am. You know what? We got through Texas weekend. It was good. It was as entertaining as we could ask for it. We don't have to come back here for another year. So let's just wring our hands of it and let's be happy that it's there. I will say this much. I agree with your point. If you're going to do a short track, make it high banked. Give these guys a chance to pass with multiple grooves. Make it like a Rockingham. I don't mind that. Heighten the, make the speeds a little bit higher, force these guys to pass a little bit more, and that'll make for a more entertaining race, I feel. So I agree with you on that point, but regardless, I'm happy I'm happy that we're done with Texas for the year, because I always get nervous every time we come to Texas, and now it's in our rearview mirror. It was entertaining, it was fun, I enjoyed it, and I'll take it 100% of the time.
Absolutely, totally agree. Race pick recap. I'll just go ahead and start out. I had Kyle Busch, which is kind of funny how that worked out because I wanted to pick Nick Sanchez, but you went first. I kind of feel like we can't pick the same guy. So you picked Sanchez, I picked Kyle Busch. Both really good picks, by the way. Both led laps. Kyle Busch ended up winning. Sanchez finished third. Your fade was the best fade ever. It was Lane Riggs, who we've talked about a lot, and I hate it, but the hits keep coming for Lane Riggs and a few other drivers too. My fade, I think, was Christian Eckes. Terrible call. I'm just waiting for them to have a bad race, and it never happens when I predict it. And then when I predict them to have a good race, they lose their brakes at Atlanta, which is exactly what happened at the Atlanta race earlier this year. Underdog picks, I had Jake Garcia. Finished 19th. Not what I expected him to be better to start 2024, but still a long season to go. And your underdog pick was who? I can't remember.
My underdog pick was Ty Majeski.
Oh, that's
I believe
right.
Was my underdog pick, and he finished 10th. So not terrible.
ThorSport struggled.
They
man.
did. I was honestly really surprised, given how Ty Majeski ran at Las Vegas. I was actually expecting ThorSport to do really well, but Thor Sports, I mean, Ford in general, let's just go across all 3 series. Ford in general is having a rough go of at the start of the year. I mean, Ford has not won a race yet this year.
And Ty Majeski was the top Ford in that race, too, finishing 10th.
Yes. Yeah, like, I mean, that's pretty, I mean, Ford in general is just struggling just across the board. I mean, they haven't won a race in Cup, haven't won a race in Xfinity, haven't won a race in trucks. Does Ryan Sieg drive a Ford? Let me ask that question. Does he drive a Ford?
Yeah.
Oh,
you had 2 runner-ups. Yeah, you had Sieg that was a fingernail away, and then Keselowski in Cup finished second. But
yeah.
Oh, poor Ryan Sieg, man.
Yeah, all that to say, it's just been a tough year all around for Ford, and it's just like, I mean, you know, I think a lot of times, like, I think we like to blame it on, like, if those that only watch the Cup Series will probably look at it and be like, well, look at the new Ford Mustang Dark Horse. I mean, this is a problem that's trickling down into the lower series. So I wonder if there's an organizational issue here, because, I mean, I have not seen Ford. I mean, this is a manufacturer that swept the championships last year. Like, Ben Rhodes, Ford, Cole Custer, Ford, Ryan Blaney, Ford. I mean, we're seeing it in the Truck Series. Like,
but they could still do it very easily, because what Ford has done, well, in particular, Team Penske, if we want to just talk Cup, but what Ben Rhodes has actually done it too, actually. So yeah, that does stay in the Ford camp, even though I think his first championship may have been as a Toyota. Regardless, Ford has mastered the Chad Knaus way in the playoff era, which is have a good early season. You know, Blaney and Majeski and Rhodes, you know, they have good regular seasons. Cole Custer. And then in the playoffs, the final 10 races, they go berserk. Now, in trucks, I definitely wouldn't say Ben Rhodes has gone berserk, but he found a way to get hot at the right time, make it to the Final Four, and survive and win a championship. Ryan Blaney did it last year in Cup. Joey Logano did it in 2022. Both those guys did not have incredible years in their respective championship years, but they got hot at the right time. Cole Custer, I think, in Xfinity is the one exception that this year as well, I know he hasn't won, but has been really, really good. Just running up front, knocking down top fives, leading laps. And last year he did the same kind of thing. Well, he kind of consistently was good throughout the year, but won Phoenix, super hot at the right time, won a championship. So with the format, as much as we want to talk noise about it, they could still do it with Majeski, Custer, and a Team Penske guy like Blaney again. It could happen.
You're correct. Yes, they could do it. I wish I could be on that hype train. It's hard for me to, when 2 Fords are in the top 10 in points right now in the Truck Series. You're looking at Ty Majeski and Matt Crafton. Matt Crafton has not even he hasn't even led a lap this year. He's still in the top 10 in points, but he hasn't led a lap this year. Ben Rhodes only has 1 top 10, has 5 laps led. Ty Majeski's been the exception. He's kind of been the Ryan Blaney of the Truck Series for Ford. Like, he's kind of carrying the banner. I think that, as crazy as it sounds, I mean, Ty Majeski at the moment looks like Ford's most likely candidate to win a championship. I wish I could be as optimistic as you are. I'm just having a hard time with that, because I look at how good that Toyota is with Corey Heim and Taylor Gray and Tricon, and I look at how good Spire was early in the year with Chevrolet. Like, it's like, man, just that's a lot that you have to deal with. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, it's all about getting to Phoenix. And we saw last year, sometimes it's just all about getting there and surviving more so than getting there and being the fastest truck. You know, sometimes that's what it's all about. I mean, Ben Rhodes won that championship last year because he stayed out of all the chaos that everyone else was in the middle of. That's why he won that championship. Right.
Totally agree. But you do have to... Now, Ben did have a better start to last year than he has in 2024. I mean, he's right now in the playoffs, outside looking in. It is early. He's only down by a few points. And he's got championship pedigree from a driver's standpoint and a crew chief standpoint with Rich Lucius. But one thing you got to consider about last year, like in 2023, Ben Rhodes had 3 different crew chiefs on the box. He gets Rich Lucius back, who had been his crew chief prior to 2023, because they had done some switch-ups with Haley Deegan's crew and his crew. He gets Rich Lucius back after Kansas in the playoff run. And he goes from the prior 4 races with crew chief Brian Ross, Richmond, IRP, Milwaukee, and Kansas. His best finish in those 4 races was 12th. He finished 12th, 16th, and 25th. Just surviving. Somehow made it to the next round. And then he gets Rich Lucius. He finishes 7th, 2nd, and then 5th in the championship race and wins it. So, I kind of hate, it's a love-hate relationship with the playoff system. But, on the concept of Ford, especially in trucks, like you said, only two in the top 10 right now in points. They have figured out the system, and someone like Ty Majeski can cruise his way through, have problems, and come out and just knock down a couple wins in the playoffs, and he's right there at the championship. I don't see Ben Rhodes winning another one. I think eventually you run out of luck, right? You run out of luck in NASCAR. You have to be good to be lucky to be good. And I think Rhodes is very good. His crew chief, very good. They're very good with strategy. But they've had a little bit of luck, too. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. I think Ty Majeski, regardless of what we say about Ford, can easily come through and win this championship if he doesn't crumble.
Well, and he's shown that he can have winning speed. You look at Martinsville as one example. He's really, really good. He's particularly good on short tracks. And, you look at the playoffs we have coming up for Ty Majeski. Yeah, the Milwaukee Mile, which Ty Majeski cheated, but still won at.
Yeah, he sure did.
He did, and that was undisputable. That did happen. But regardless, still won that race. You have Bristol, which is, again, and then you return to Martinsville in November. The pathway is there for Ty Majeski if he wants to get there to Phoenix, which is, I don't know if I'd consider Phoenix a short track, but, it races very similar to a short track. I'd kind of compare it to New Hampshire. I'd say, well, that's the closest comparison to Phoenix is New Hampshire, which the Truck Series does not go to New Hampshire. Oddly enough, I don't know why, but they don't go to New Hampshire. But to be that as it may, the path is there for Ty Majeski if he gets there. That's the thing. It's just the problem is there's also Christian Eckes, who's swept the short track races so far this year, and we know how good Christian Eckes is on short tracks. And Corey Haim's just good everywhere, so you're gonna have to worry about him. Right. It's a really this is an uphill battle for Ty Majeski, and it's definitely gonna be interesting. And I hope I definitely think there could be some concern that could the equipment hold someone like Majeski back here at some point late in the season. I'm not sure. But Ford in general, just across all three series, just isn't showing up right now. They haven't won a race yet at any level. And it's it's been a tough one to start the year. By the way, to my point about Ford only has one driver in the top 10 in the Cup Series. In the Xfinity Series, I'm going to pull up the Xfinity Series standings here real quick as well to see where they are at in Xfinity. Ford, as of right now, has, as I wait for my computer to load,
three.
They have two in the top 10 right now.
Oh,
Cole Custer and Riley Herbst.
Sieg must be close.
Yes. Sieg's 11th. He's 3 points out. So we can throw him in there just for fun, but yeah. But the funny thing is, from Sieg, you have to go down to 23rd to find the next Ford. So for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, I think they've got plenty of time to figure it out, but there's no question it is alarming that they have not gotten a victory yet, especially considering they have won. Or they won all the NASCAR championships of 2023. But we'll see what happens when we get to Kansas if someone like Ty Majeski or Ben Rhodes can figure it out. And that reminder that we hate, because as truck fans, we hate to see a long break, but that's what we got. Truck has a limited schedule. The trucks have a limited schedule compared to Cup and Xfinity, and they are off for the next 2 weeks before they get to Kansas at the beginning of May. So just keep that in mind going forward as the NASCAR National Series head to Dega and then Dover after that, I believe. And then trucks are back at Kansas. Outside of the Ford camp, a manufacturer that has been awesome in 2024 is Team Chevy. That's who Kyle Busch drives for now. And his Spire number 7 truck was awesome, and it looked awesome. So I wanted to get to some social media here. Outside of Kyle Busch, having to work for this win against a very competitive group of young guns like Eckes, Sanchez, and Corey Haim, that truck looked awesome. And not only did it look awesome, it had to feel awesome for a company like Realtree, who I don't think anybody would have believed this until Kyle Busch had won that race on Friday night. But Realtree, as much as we've seen them around in NASCAR, This is their first ever NASCAR National Series win. And nobody more appropriate than Kyle Busch. And the way that paint scheme looked with that light green on that I'm such an anti-camo guy, dude. I can't stand camo. But the way that truck looked with that lime green and just the paint scheme was just awesome looking. And I know a lot of people are excited that Lionel Racing, who makes the diecasts, announced that diecast will be produced. So if you're a Kyle Busch fan, you probably already know this information. That will be a popular diecast, I'm sure, whenever pre-orders start going through. I think they're available now, actually, via Lionel Racing. But yeah, what do you think about that paint scheme? The social media reaction has been great overall to that.
I mean, I love cars that try neon. I really do, because I mean, I think, you know,
neon. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah. That the coolest thing I love, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, but like the paint schemes on these trucks and cars in NASCAR, the TV doesn't do it justice how much those schemes pop. Like they really do. Like when you get to a track in real life, like it's amazing just how vibrant they are and how big and like how bold they are. It's really, really cool. That's one of the few paint schemes that like you can see that boldness coming through your TV screen. And that's where I give that paint scheme a lot of credit when it comes to that with the neon. I'm a bit more, I felt like the cam, you know, I gotta go against you a little bit here. I actually liked the camo. All right. I felt like it looked a little strange being next to neon, but I felt like it worked since they were both kind of a green color. They both kind of worked. Of course, being Texas, you know, with the kind of the hunting theme, that sort of stuff. I feel like, you know, like the hunting cowboy type theme. I feel like it works. You know, I felt like it does. And again, Kyle Busch able to get a win for Realtree, you know, to prove again that, you know, Kyle Busch still has it if he could get some better equipment in Cup, it seems. But, you know, I thought I liked it. Again, if you can find a way to pop on TV the way that you see these schemes pop in real life, I got to give you credit for that. And that's what I'm going to give Kyle. That's what I'm going to give Realtree credit for there. Yeah, no, totally agree. And you're so right. TV never does justice on how colorful and how vibrant's the best term to use there, how vibrant some of these paint schemes are when you're actually at the racetrack. So that's always another encouraging reason to go to the racetrack, because you get a better vantage point and a better look and a better appreciation of certain paint schemes like this Realtree one that is not just a winner on paint or wrap. I guess everything's wrapped now, but it was a winner on the racetrack with Kyle Busch. Shout out to those guys that gave him a run for his money, because even though he swept both stages, dominated the race from a lap leading standpoint, I mean, it was not easy. I mean, Christian Eckes and Nick Sanchez were all over him throughout this race. And then you have Corey Heim, as you said earlier, you gave him a shout out for working his way up through the field. And I mean, we were a lap away from a photo finish. We were a lap away from a finish that would have been pretty close to what we saw in the Xfinity race. And this isn't the first time this has happened between these guys. Everybody talks about how Corey Heim is going to be this generational talent. And this is the second time that he has been knocking on the door of beating Kyle Busch in a very dramatic finish. And that was Pocono. You remember that Pocono race? Oh, I remember that. Corey Heim gave it up. I remember that. In the tunnel turn. He did. So, I mean, that was Corey's got to be that like, was a class. What do I got to do? Yep. I was thinking about that exactly as that finish was going on. Because, I mean, when I watched that Pocono race last year, I thought to myself, that was Corey Heim getting a lesson from a Cup Series guy about this is how you do it. I think Corey Heim was really licking his chops because he was like, I'm going to give it to him this time. I'm going to do it. He wasn't able to do it. You know, still give Corey Heim a lot of credit for coming up there to finish second. Here's a crazy stat. Corey Heim didn't lead a lap at all. I know. On Friday night. Just looking at he didn't lead a lap. Yep. Which is crazy. You only had You only had 4 lap leaders. Actually, yeah. Wait a second. Hold on. What am I looking at here? I'm looking at the wrong race. Yeah, I'm looking. It was only 4. Yeah, it was only 4. It was Busch. It was Sanchez, Busch and Zane. Yeah. Yep, that's who it was. So you wouldn't have thought that with how competitive it was. No, you wouldn't have. I mean, it was always interesting towards the front, particularly at the end of the race. Like it seemed like as the race went on, like Kyle Busch had a really good long run truck. Like it was like the first few laps after a restart, the guys could kind of stick with him. But like once like they hit about like lap 10, 15, 20, Kyle Busch started to kind of inch away. I think he had a really good truck on the long run. That's, I think, what helped him, and I think that's what helped him lead a lot of those laps. Because I mean, the middle portion of that race was just a bunch of long green flag runs with a couple of stage breaks thrown in there. So Kyle Busch, was able to do that. But late in the race, when the guys were close with him, they were able to compete with him there towards the end there. Christian Eckers actually got the better of him on one of those late restarts, only to get passed by Kyle Busch again. And then Corey Heim, made his presence felt. So
yeah, Corey Heim had sent, which I was surprised, and I had bet money on Kyle Busch, and a lot of my followers were betting on Kyle Busch too. And Kyle Busch gave up the bottom on one of those restarts, and Corey Heim sent him 3 wide, and that's what allowed Eckes in that top lane we were talking about that has found some grip, just took off. And then we got another caution, and he got him back. But I was very surprised when Busch got split like that in that late race moment.
Yeah, I was too, but Kyle Busch was able to find a way again. Kyle Busch is just head and shoulders talent-wise above everybody else, That's just how he is. He has so much talent. He's really good. I know a lot of people get frustrated seeing him run in these lower series races a lot of the time. I think it's cool. I think especially given the fact that there's limitations in it now that he can't do it every week. But I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting. I will say though, I did wonder to some extent, like what would this race have been like if Busch wasn't there? If this was a Heim Sanchez Eckes show, like how would that race have ended? I wonder that. I do wonder that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Who knows? I mean, those other 3 guys all had a shot. And Zane Smith, too. I feel like Zane didn't really have the truck. He did catch a lucky caution when he stayed out late. That was when Lane Riggs had crashed. But, Zane Smith was there as well, and he got a top 5. But talking about Lane Riggs, man, we got to talk about these guys just for a moment who have been either contenders or guys that we would expect to be contenders, and the hits just keep coming. Lane Riggs in that number 38 truck crashed again, another bad finish. Grant Enfinger had a crash after getting some stage points. He's had a bad couple weeks. Tyler Ankrum, who we were just talking about, it seems like yesterday, as the point leader, 2 of the last 3 weeks outside the top 20. He had a terrible weekend, top to bottom, crashing in practice, going to a backup, and then getting crashed again in an incident with Thad Moffitt, another guy who the hits just keep on coming. I mean, what sticks out of all these guys for you in terms of who really should be performing better? Who should be avoiding all this carnage and having themselves in a competitive spot?
I think, honestly, Grant Enfinger, I think, whether we all wanted to admit it or not, I think a lot of people expected him to take a competitive dip this year because, I mean, and this is no offense to CR7, but, like, I mean, it's not the same caliber of equipment that GMS was. So Grant Enfinger, I think we kind of expected he was going to take a dip this year. Mm-hmm. He's still 10th in points, so he's still in playoff position. So you got to give him some credit. He's by no means bad.
So stage
the guy
points.
I'm really just, with some stage points, he did. The guy that you really have to be concerned with is just Lane Riggs. I mean, Lane Riggs, 7 races into the season, he's got 1 top 10 finish, and the hits just keep on coming. I mean, for a race team that, won a championship a couple years ago with Zane Smith. This year, Lane Riggs is just not even in the conversation, most weeks. He had the rough he had the rough race at Daytona thanks to the DVP, disqualified at Atlanta. And obviously, yes, he had the weeks. Obviously, I think Coda was out of his control. Martinsville was out of his control. He had a top 10 at Bristol. But you also have races like Texas where he just wrecked. You have Las Vegas where he was just slow. Even at Atlanta, he finished, I believe he finished 2 laps down in that race. So it's not all because Lane Riggs has been screwed out of wins. It's just, some of it's just been bad performance. And some of it's just been, and unfortunately the last couple weeks before this, it was on stuff that was out of his control, a little bit of his pit crew, and then getting knocked around like a pinball at Martinsville. But, he really needed a good run at Texas. He really did. He had some momentum going, but he just couldn't find a way to, the fact that he crashed out after scoring stage points earlier in that race, and the fact that he crashed out, that was a disappointing day for Lane Riggs.
Yeah, He was fast. I mean, he was running around the top 5 up until late in that race when the green flag cycle went through. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this was a key race. When you go into these long breaks, yeah, it's a good time to recharge, right? Like that's exactly, I think, what this team needs. But man, how much better would they feel knowing that they entered this long break with a top 10 run, a top 5 run? I mean, I think it would make a substantial difference in just the overall feel of accomplishment and just momentum in general. So yeah, Lane Riggs, I think, is in the biggest danger zone out of everybody. And you talk about the CR7, the performance that we expected to decline a bit with Grant Enfinger. Top 10 in points. Pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Pretty damn good.
I mean, honestly, I give Enfinger credit. I mean, when I saw he was going to be making the move to CR7, like I was honestly disappointed,
Same.
because I felt like that. I was disappointed because I was like, man, like this is a guy that could compete for championships if he was in the right truck. But he ends up with Cody Rohrbaugh instead, and he's not always getting the results you want him to get, but he's always finding ways to, like you said, he's earning stage points. He's points racing really, really well. And I mean, he's already starting to show. I mean, heck, I mean, this is a team that, finished. I mean, hasn't finished better than in a full season. I'm looking at their stats right now. They finished 21st last year with Colby Howard behind the wheel. Now you have Grant Enfinger, you're 9th in the points. He's really taking this team to some new heights, and I think you have to give Enfinger a lot of credit for that. I don't hold a lot of his struggles against him, although I do. I mean, I really just wish Grant Enfinger just could have something break his way, because he's had a lot of things throughout his racing career. I mean, if you look at his whole story, I mean, just like it's been a lot of stuff out of his control that's just fallen apart for him. And the fact that he's making do with this situation he has with CR7 and is doing a really good job, I think that you got to give Enfinger some credit for that. Absolutely.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, we got to give some shout outs like you mentioned earlier, man. I want to know who sticks out the most in this little segment. Tanner Gray, crash in practice, backup truck. Wasn't great throughout the race, but caught that Lane Riggs caution. He was one of the guys that stayed out, got the track position. He ends up with the top 10 after all that. Daniel Dye. I mean, there's an argument to be made. Daniel Dye deserves the biggest one because he didn't need strategy. He didn't need any luck. He had an awesome run. He was wheeling it. 6th place finish, and he, like I said, he didn't need strategy. He ran up front. He finished 6th in stage 1, 8th in stage 2. I mean, he was consistently good in this race. He deserves a big shout out for one of his best overall runs in his young tenure as a Truck Series driver. Lawless Allen. Talk about the Fords. Woo. Man, if you could have gotten, look, the Truck Series betting variety is not great, but every now and then they'll do a top Chevy or a top Ford prop on a couple sports books. If there was a prop on Lawless Allen to be the top Ford, it would have been at least 100 to 1. 100 to 1, 150 to 1. And he was one position away from being the top Ford and one position away from a top 10 run. Finished 11th. I've given Lawless Allen a lot of flack because he's been one of these guys that in his equipment that isn't great over the past couple of years has caused accidents, has helped manipulate outcomes of races because of late race tomfoolery, whether it's with mechanical failures or silly crashes. He deserves a shout out, and a Rayum truck finished 11th. I mean, that's awesome. That's not something that happens very often, and he didn't need it to happen at like a super speedway. He did it at 1.5 miles. And while Texas can be crazy, still deserves some credit for that run. And then Stephen Parsons with the top 10. This Stephen Parsons, I think, is a legitimate, good quality race car driver. I think every time he gets in a truck with this team, Henderson, that's shown they can be pretty good. They won a race with Parker Kligerman a couple years ago at Mid-Ohio. He's come in here and been competitive, running around the top 10, at times running around the top 5, and in 4 or 5 starts this year, he's got 2 top 10s now. So Stephen Parsons deserves a shout-out too. Out of all these guys, who sticks out to you on the shout-out department?
Give credit to Tanner Gray. The dude started 34th, finished 8th. I think that's all you got to say with that. I mean, given how tough they claim it is to pass at Texas to go from 34th to 8th, give him credit, especially considering how his day started.
The backup,
crashing in practice, having to go to a backup car, to be able to salvage that, turn it around, and get a top 10 out of it. Give Tanner Gray a lot of credit for that. I think he's the biggest shout out I'd personally give out of that of the entire weekend. But shout out to Daniel Dye as well. I agree. That was a legitimate top 10 where he was up there all night, stayed out of trouble. He did everything right, and Daniel Dye ends up with the top 10 finish. You have to give him credit for that.
Yeah, another thing too, as I go down this list, talking about our last podcast, we talked a lot about Spire and Rajah Caruth, and the one guy we talked about who had some momentum that we said really needed to step it up because of what his teammates are doing. Well, shout out to Rajah Caruth. You got to give him a little bit of a shout out because of what he went through at the beginning of the race. Had to go to the rear, had just a lot of problems early avoiding crashes. Then he crashed. He comes back to finish 12th. We don't even know how good his truck even was because of everything he went through. But in the Spire department, Kyle Busch wins. Rajah goes through that, comes back and finishes 12th. But Chase Purdy, where the hell was he? I mean, this is a guy in a team that's got to be better. I mean, what are we doing?
I mean, especially after you finish third at Martinsville and have such a great day and you feel like you're starting to do something. I mean, he laid an egg at Texas. There's no way around it. And I mean, like I said, I mean, I think Chase Purdy's a guy. I think you have to start thinking about what does the safety of his seat look like? Because he's starting to, I mean, he's really slipping out there. Currently, he is 17th in the points. He is 37 points out of the playoffs, which I know that doesn't sound like a ton, but that's over a half a race worth of points. And we're already 7 races into the season, only 9 races to go till the playoffs. I mean, that's just a tough, just not a good day for Chase Purdy. He was just non-existent, and I mean, it's tough. It's really, really tough to see that. I expected more out of him. He did pretty well with KPM equipment last year. I expected more out of Chase Purdy, and he's just not doing it.
Yeah, totally agreed. We got to represent the Mississippi a little bit better, Mr. Purdy. But also, shout out to Stuart Friesen's truck, by the way, the Chili truck. Look, the Chili's menu truck looked pretty damn good. I got to give a little bit of credit there. That was another good social media response, reaction.
Best paint scheme of the weekend.
For sure.
Paint scheme of the weekend. Yes, 100%.
I hate that I missed that when we were talking about Realtree. Both really good paint schemes, but very, very fun race weekend overall, not just in trucks, but in Xfinity and Cup. And I'm very, very pleasantly surprised with how the weekend went, especially with the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And remember, we got 2 weeks off here before Kansas. We will be back before Kansas to do maybe a playoff preview. Maybe we do some playoff predictions. Take the break to kind of analyze who makes the top 10. See, I love the Truck Series playoffs too because it's the only pure resemblance of the OG chase for the Cup. You only get 10 drivers that make it. So there is no mediocrity in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series when we get down to the playoff crunch, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll be back before Kansas to do a preview on that. Don't forget, be sure to follow all of us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Dale Tanhardt. Same thing for at Daily Downforce. Josh Lipowski at JLipowski18 on Twitter, and check out everything he's got going on over at the Daily Downforce, and bookmark dailydownforce.com. Check us out there every single day. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, subscribe on your favorite podcast audio platform, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, whatever you choose, listen to. Doesn't matter to me, doesn't matter to us. We just appreciate you for listening here on the Pickup Throwdown podcast. Enjoy the break. I'm not going to enjoy it because I miss trucks, but we'll be back for another fun weekend at Kansas coming up and some playoff predictions even before that. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time on the Pickup Throwdown podcast.